Welcome everybody to the ALCP cast. I'm Vinny Eastwood, the ALCP social media advisor and chief propagandist. I'm here with the ALCP secretary, Irinka, and also the former party leader and legal advisor to ALCP, Michael Appleby. Now, we're going to be going over a few things during this video. So the number one thing on the agenda today is the referendum that's been promised by the Greens. And Michael, you saw The Nation this morning, and the question was asked of James Shaw whether or not this would be a binding referendum. What did he say?
Well, he said that as far as he was concerned, it's not going to be binding, but of course they would pay attention to what the majority of New Zealanders wanted at the next referendum. And of course we want to try and make sure that the referendum is not actually going to be delayed until 2020. We want to make sure that it's taken, or the referendum is actually held as soon as possible, because that's what Winston Peters promised many years ago, because I think that the Greens are getting credit for this referendum, which is something that Winston Peters was the one who actually first said, I will believe what New Zealanders say in a referendum. So let's give credit to Winston, not to the Greens, because when the Greens say that they don't think that the referendum will be binding, when they say, as James Shaw has just said when asked about comments he made about Winston, he says, oh, that was just campaign talk. We don't want this promise to hold the referendum to be just campaign talk. We want to make sure that the whole of the government actually brings this referendum, because it's not just the Greens. It's ACT. Don't forget that ACT has always promised that cannabis should be legalised. Let's not forget that the Opportunities Party has also said that they want cannabis to be legalised. And of course the Labour Party has always promised that it will have a look at medicinal cannabis. We just have to make sure that they are nudged over into a referendum on recreational cannabis as well as medicinal cannabis. And as someone who has actually run for Wellington Central 6 times now, I've actually had both Grant Robertson, who's tipped to become the new finance minister, and James Shaw admit that they have smoked cannabis. In fact, out of 11 people running on the platform, 9 of us all said, yes, of course we've smoked cannabis. Next question, thanks very much. And Grant Robertson used to be the spokesperson for the Labour Party on health, and he at least has promised that he has read the Law Commission's report on cannabis, which said that all questions of cannabis should be dealt with as a health issue and not as a criminal issue. So I'm very hopeful that Grant will be there in the forefront, trying to make sure that the government regulates cannabis and is able to profit from the legalization and regulation of cannabis, because I noticed that Colorado has just announced that for the year 2017 they've taken over $500 million in taxes from the regulation of the cannabis industry over there. So we're hopeful that the Green Party won't just regard it as campaign talk. We're hopeful that Winston Peters will in fact keep the rest of these buggers honest. Because there was also something in the last few days after the election where Jim Bolger was asked about his experiences with Winston, and he said that Winston Peters was an honourable, honest man who kept every single one of his promises. So we're going to be in close touch with Winston Peters over the next few years to make sure that he gets the credit for actually arranging for the question of a referendum to be included in the negotiations. So we're delighted that Winston Peters has got in. And in fact, about a week before the election, the Aotearoa Legalise Cannabis Party sent a letter to Winston to make sure that he would include the question of legalising cannabis in his negotiations, and we're delighted that it is now a part of the promise of the new government to have that.
Now, may I also add into these, there is the possibility of sabotage. Let's say Winston, the Greens, Labour and all of those, God willing, are absolutely honest and absolutely committed to this referendum as soon as possible. One thing that I'd like to see is an immediate moratorium on cannabis arrests and prosecutions and things of that nature, because these things actually cause health issues with people when they are arrested. It causes an enormous amount of stress, and stress, as we all know, is cause of 90% of illnesses. And so if we can put an immediate moratorium on that and then worry about whether the referendum, and perhaps it should be a binding referendum, perhaps in my opinion, and I'm an extremist, I believe that the will of the people is the basis for the authority of government, and that if the people will something, then the government should do it. That's just my thoughts on it, because I believe in responsibility and accountability and evidence-based policy as they are party principles. Now, furthermore, and I think the last thing on the agenda here today is, although the referendum may get passed and what have you, I want people to realise that there is absolutely an agenda to derail it already underway by a number of interested parties who do not want cannabis legalised. They do.
The Family First group.
Family First, Sensible Sentencing Trust, and a whole bunch of other groups. You can bet your bottom dollar right now, ladies and gentlemen, are planning in their little underground basement apartment cubicle things surrounded by creatures of the night, ways to derail this wonderful piece of legislation that could just say...
Yeah. But I think that's why the relevancy of the Aotearoa Legalise Cannabis Party is really important, that it carries on at the moment, because even though we have sort of stated, like, once we get legalisation, we're happy to sort of go our separate ways, but at the moment we still haven't got it. And so we have to, I agree with you, Michael, that we have to stay in the business. We have to continue to lobby, write letters, give them the latest information, encourage them. But the other thing I thought was, rather than going up against people like Family First and Sensible Sentencing and any other opposition groups.
And the National Party are against it. So don't forget, there's a very heavy number of...
they could vote against it.
Exactly.
They've got 45% of the votes.
Yes. That's right. So we have to stay... Our part of the thing is to talk to Family First, see if we can send them a delegation and to try and explain to them about it. Try and make friends with these groups if we can, because often we've sort of gone rah, but maybe we should try a different tact and try and bring them into our tent.
There was a recent backbenchers where Mackie Herbert locked horns with Crusher Collins, and you could see that Crusher Collins was very much against the legalising of cannabis. She didn't address the issues that Mackie brought up, which was that we are there for industrial hemp. She just took it as the legalisation of cannabis and went right off track, but you could see how vehemently against the legalising of cannabis for any reason she was against, and I think that she speaks for a lot of the National Party MPs.
May I ask, both of you having 21 years experience in this fight against the cannabis laws, do you think that this is a time for cannabis activists to relax or fight harder than ever?
We need to redouble our efforts and to make sure that the parties who are going to be governing don't put it on the back bench, don't put it on the back burner. Or if at least they're going to do it on the back burner, at least make sure that the knives are hot.
Yeah, exactly. So we can stick it in their back. Now, I believe as well, Irinka, you had one final closing statement as well. ALCP through the next election. I mean, we're still going to be here. We're still going to be advising everybody. We've also need to advise people that there are on cannabis.org.nz the open letters that have been sent by ALCP that have been composed by Irinka and Michael respectively to Winston Peters, the Greens, and to Labour. So you can go and check out those open letters by going to cannabis.org.nz. There are also a number of videos. You can watch the video of Marky Herbert on the Cannabis Party Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Aotearoa LCP. That's Aotearoa LCP, facebook.com/. Right. So, any final statements you'd like to make there, Irinka?
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact is that Rosie Renton, she's just been busted. I mean, that is just cruel, absolute cruelty. And I think what we have to do is try and bring the awareness of how horrible this law is. People seem to, I think what's happened is we've got a sort of a brainwashing conditioning of where people, it's happened for so long that putting people in jail for cannabis is just, nobody blinks an eye, you know. It's sort of like, well, doesn't matter, they're in jail. There's no thought about the impact on this person's lives. And as you were saying the other day, Vinny, the lives of the other people around them, and it's just a terrible, terrible thing. And if it was in any other time, in any other country, politically, people would be taking up arms. But this is the most peaceful revolution ever, and it's been going on for longer than 21 years, but we've been going for 21 years fighting it.
And just recently, Peru has legalized medicinal cannabis as well. That's come out in the last few days. Within a week of our having our election, other countries are moving ahead as well. This is not a static war. This is a continuous war, so that we've got to the stage now where there are some 6 states in America, including California, which have legalized cannabis for recreational purposes, as well as some 30 states out of the 52 or so that have legalized it for medicinal purposes. So it is a progressive war. And of course, Canada, which is regarded as one of the leading Western countries, has just legalized it under Justin Trudeau for recreational purposes and for medicinal purposes as well. And of course, we keep forgetting that the Aotearoa Legalise Cannabis Party has in fact has caused industrial hemp to be grown in New Zealand now, and there are some 50 people with licenses to grow it. And of course, medicinal cannabis is supposed to have been legalized in September 2017. It's just that the doctors haven't been able to source proper cannabis medicine to actually provide to the people. So we've actually got the law virtually changed on medicinal cannabis. It's just that we need to make sure that we have the resources to provide to the people who are now getting it under the Green Fairies and under Green Cross.
And I think that also those Green Fairies, but as I said before, my opinion, this is not party policy. Maybe I'll bring it up at the AGM. Call for an immediate moratorium on all cannabis-related arrests and prosecutions right now until the outcome of the referendum can be known.
Unfortunately, you can't just have a moratorium. And
exactly.
I'm speaking here as a lawyer, because you can't have any members of parliament just arbitrarily changing the law and telling the police not to enforce the law. It's actually got to pass through parliament. So what we want to do is to make sure that they elevate the problem of prohibition to the top of their agenda and make sure that as soon as the parliament does come back in, they pass the law to say no more arrests.
And then there is the point of the fact that the police do have discretionary powers, which they could use even more so. And I think in a way, Normal have made the point that, the arrests are down. There's not as many arrests, so they're not chasing it as vigorously, but they still are. So,
they're making targeted arrests. They're specifically targeting now the people who are trying to supply people with medical cannabis. If the media articles are the Green Ferry busts, many Green Ferries are being busted recently. In fact, they seem to be being specifically targeted. If I was to be a very cynical person, which I am.
Well, I've been representing people in the courts for many years now on possession of cannabis and growing cannabis cases, and I've also confirmed that the police are exercising their discretion, and so are the judges, because, of course, if you can point out to the judges that under Section 106 of the Sentencing Act that the consequences of a conviction will be out of all proportion to the gravity of the offending, the judges are much readier to accept that sort of an argument.
And you've actually had a success with that particular argument, haven't you, Michael?
Yes.
Which is fantastic. So
well, a number of successes, not just one success. The judges are much happier because I'm now appearing before judges that I used to teach and used to smoke cannabis with when they were law students. Well, they were lawyers, but of course,
No names mentioned.
No names.
Yeah. The old changing of the guard, and this is another thing. We seem to have now a new, younger Prime Minister and that kind of thing. There is a generation that is passing and a new generation that is coming into power, and this happens every 20 or 30 years or so. And so the culture of the last 20 or 30 years is now reaching fruition, because for the last 20 or 30 years, people in New Zealand have been getting blazed, man, like real blaze, and people have been trying to find the best medical quality stuff so that they can live their own lives and have their lives back. All right, and so
absolutely,
and so cops, if you're listening to this, and I know that you watch all the videos on my channel at least. Just, please exercise your discretion.
And if you're not watching us, why not?
Yeah.
We're subversives.
Yeah, just don't drop by and see us, we might be busy.
Not in the next half hour anyway.
Yeah. Discretion, people. Discretion. All right.
A cannabis cafe in every home. That's what our goal is.
My God. One can only hope. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Cannabis.org.nz and Facebook.com/Aotearoa LCP for more info. This is Irinka from the Secretary for ALCP, former party leader and legal advisor Michael Appleby, and I'm Vinny Eastwood, the Chief Propagandist for ALCP, and we will catch you next time, folks.
Cheers.